Since we have talked about what a median, midsegment, and an angle bisector is, we're going to learn some more characteristics and just how we can actually solve that with a problem. So in number 1 and 2, we need to look at our picture and determine what type of special segment we have. And if we see that it connects from the midpoint, we know that's midpoint because these two pieces are congruent, to the vertex, these are medians. And what we have to remember about a median, so AF right here, if that whole thing is 9, and so usually what I do is I draw a separate picture for the median. This is one of the few that I do that for, because we know that if we divide up our piece into 3 equal pieces, this point G, where they all meet in the center, which is called the centroid, that's our point G right here, that it will be 2/3, so 2 out of the 3 pieces away from the vertex or point A. So if you look at it, we can tell this is the longer piece, this is the shorter piece. So that means that it has 2 of them, and then the shorter piece only has 1. So if we know the whole distance is 9, that means that each of these will be 3. And now if we want to know what is the length from A to G, we just add up the number of pieces that we've got. So that would be 6. We are going to do the same thing then with CE. So CE is right here, so we need to redraw it again. We know the whole distance is 7.2, and if we divide it up into 3 equal pieces, our point G, since C is our vertex, that means that our point G will be the 2 spaces away because it's 2/3 the distance away. Then we need to take 7.2 and we need to divide it by 3. And that gives us 2.4. So each of these pieces are 2.4 spaces apart from each other. But our question in number 2 now is what's the difference from, or what is the space from G to E? So it's just one of the pieces. So our answer would be 2.4. Next, in number 3, we need to look at our picture and determine what type of special segment that is. So we have it going through the midpoint, so point D is the midpoint, and it goes through A, the vertex, so this is also a median again. But we also see the 90 degrees, so that means if it goes from the vertex to the opposite side and it's 90 degrees, that's our altitude. And if it goes through the midpoint and it's 90 degrees through that midpoint, it's also the perpendicular bisector. So you can have a picture that is multiple, the segment is multiple different ones. So next, AD is 21, so the height of this triangle is 21. BC, so this whole distance in the bottom is 18, so that means each of these pieces is 9 away from each other. We need to find the perimeter of triangle ABC, so that's the whole thing. Well, we already have one side, but we need to know what these other 2 sides are going to be. They will be the same because if you look at our 2 right triangles, we have one that's 21 and 9, the other one is 21 and 9, so the hypotenuse will need to be the same, but we need to use Pythagorean theorem to find that out. Remember, Pythagorean theorem is our a squared plus b squared equals c squared, and we label the c first as our hypotenuse, so that would be the part we do not know. The a and the b doesn't matter, but it's my 2 legs already labeled, so that would be my 9 squared plus the 21 squared. And then once we solve for c, that would be the length of one of those sides. So if we add these together, we get 522 once we square and add them together. Then we need to take the square root of both of those sides to figure out what AC is going to be. So that means that AC is 22.85, so that's the AC, but remember it's the same size as that other side of the triangle. So if we add up all 3 sides, we get 63.7, and that would be our feet since we've got perimeter. Moving on to number 4, 5, 6, 7 with our triangle on the side, point U is the midpoint, which that part was forgotten to give to you. W is also the midpoint. So that means that this segment right here is a mid-segment. The same is also true for SV and VT. The point V is the midpoint, so UV is also a mid-segment of our triangle. And the rule we know about mid-segments is that it will be half the size of the side is parallel to. So for the very, very first question for UW, if we know ST, the side it's parallel to, is 10.2, we can divide that by 2, and that would give us UW. So UW is going to be 5.1. Next, for RT, we know that UV is going to be parallel to it, and if I take 2 times the 5.6 we already have, that will equal the side it's parallel to, or the RT. So if you multiply 5.6 times 2, we get 11.2. And since we already know our T now is 11.2, that means each of our little pieces right here are going to be half of that because point W is the midpoint. So if we take 11.2 and we divide that by 2, we get 5.6. So each of these are 5.6. One thing that we also talked about when we have our midsegments is that it's parallel to that third side, which means if I have this line, this transversal going through it, I've got 41 degrees right there. If I have another parallel line to it, that means that these two angles are going to be congruent to each other. So if angle VUW has 41, that means the angle UVS will also be 41 degrees because we have alternate interior angles. Moving on to our next picture, if we know that WY bisects angle XWZ, so this line bisects it, that means that it cuts it in half, so we have an angle bisector. For number 8, if we have angle XYW, that is going to be equal to this other angle. So we have to label it with 3 letters. Remember, the vertex has to be the middle letter, so we know W will be the middle letter, but then we need the Y and the Z on both sides of it. It doesn't matter which one goes where, though. Next, if we have the XY is 9 centimeters, then we want to know what is ZY going to be. Well, if these two lines connecting the angle bisector to the side of the angle, if those are perpendicular, that part needs to be given to us, then these two sides will be the same. So that will also be 9 centimeters. Since we know in number 8 that XWY is equal to YWZ, if we have that XWY is 25 degrees, we know then that the other one has to be 25 degrees. But in this one, we have that XWZ, we want the whole size. So we have to add the 25 and 25 together, so we get 50 degrees for that missing angle. Number 11, 12, and 13, we have a new picture, and it does tell us that TS is an angle bisector. That means these two angles will be congruent. And SU, or US, is an angle bisector, so both of those will be congruent. They give us the 15, so why don't we fill in the other one with 15. We also have a triangle here, and if we know one is 90, the other one is 15, we know that the third one then has to add up to equal 180 degrees. That tells us that the angle USR will be 75 degrees, but that part they're not really asking us. This first one we can already answer is RUS, and that's already the 15 that they already gave us in our picture. For VTS, so VTS is just this angle right here, just this half of it. But we need to use the idea that this is one large triangle to help us find that. If we draw a new triangle of just this outside edge, we know that together, these two together will be 30 degrees. And then we already have our 110, so if we take 180 and subtract those two, we end up with 40 degrees. So angle T altogether is 40, but if we only want half of it, remember it's split in half, so that means both of those angles down here are 20 and 20 degrees. For the last question, they're asking us to find the perpendicular distance from point S to the side VT. So just kind of eyeball it in there, that's about what we want to find. One thing that they give us in our picture, or in the directions, is SR. So this height right here is 3. Now remember from our picture up above, if we have an angle bisector and it's perpendicular to the edges of that angle, they will be congruent to each other. So if we look at this angle right here, and I just redrew my picture, so this is my triangle right here. So this is my angle bisector. I already know these two are 20 degrees. And I have the 3 centimeters in my picture already, but we know that if this is the angle bisector and it's perpendicular to the edge of the angle, we know those two will be the same. So for our answer number 13, we know it will also be 3 centimeters.